Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's a real pleasure to be in a real community and not in a big city. I want to thank the Chamber and all the mining companies who sponsored for that opportunity. About 5 years ago, I moved to a tiny cotton farming community in Tennessee, Hickory Valley, Tennessee, and I learned a lot about the importance of winning support on Wall Street. But if you wanted to do it, you needed to really learn how to serve local leadership. Because if we're going to re-engineer how money works, then we're going to have to re-engineer how culture works and how our relationships with each other work at the most root level. And it's the local leaders who have that knowledge. It's the local banker who knows how the utilities work and how the roads work and how the educational system works and how the court works, and knows, you know, it may make sense to do this, but don't get Harry and Sam in the same room, because last year they had a fight at the PTA, and how not to do that. So it's the local leadership who really understands sort of how we can re-engineer for whole ecosystems. Now, I wanted to start also by thanking GATA and Bill, but I wanted to start with a story of when I realized that GATA was so important. I was in the United States Senate. It was the summer of 2000, and I was having a meeting with the Chief of Staff to the Senate Chairman of the Appropriation Committee, Subcommittee for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which I had been Assistant Secretary of Housing for. So basically, in short, for those of you who are not American, that's the person in Washington who has the most power over that pot of money, Senate Appropriation Subcommittee Chairman. So it was a person I didn't know very well, and she said to me, well, what do you think is going on at HUD? It's the department's acronym, HUD. What do you think is going on? And I was somebody I didn't know, so I was trying to be discreet, and I said, I don't know, what do you think is going on? And they looked me dead in the eye and they said, HUD is being run as a criminal enterprise. Now, let me put this in context. At the time, HUD had approximately $500 billion of FHA mortgage insurance in force. And Ginnie Mae, which is a subsidiary of HUD, had approximately $500 billion of mortgage-backed securities guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. Treasury. So we're talking about a very significant financial operation, and that operation is run on a matrix structure essentially by a combination of the Department of Treasury, the Department of Justice, the New York Fed, Citibank, J.P. Morgan Chase, Lockheed Martin, and a group of defense contractors. So HUD is being run as a criminal enterprise. They are intentionally running it as a criminal enterprise. Now, at the time, it was right after fiscal 1999, when the books at HUD closed, and over $59 billion of undocumentable adjustments were reported as HUD refused to comply with a law that said they had to report audited financial statements. But I don't want to pick just on HUD, because it was in a process where the federal government reported $4 trillion of undocumentable adjustments over a 4-year period, and over what is now four Secretary of Treasuries refused to produce audited financial statements as required by law. And when she said that, it took me a moment to to digest and let it sink in. And I realized that what we were dealing with was literally a financial coup d'etat. And at that moment, the first thing that came to my mind, I swear to you, was who? If we're going to have this much of a fundamental restructuring of our institutions, who can I trust, not just to win the case on Main Street? That's my title of my speech today, Winning Support on Main Street. Who can I trust who will be worthy of Main Street's report? And the first name that came to my mind exactly at that moment, can anybody guess what it was? Bill Murphy. Can I get a round of applause for this? I'd known Bill at that time for about 1.5 years, and I'd been in litigation with the Department of Justice over a 9-year process which really came out of the mortgage bubble and my efforts when I worked in Washington to try and prevent the mortgage bubble. And if you really deeply get into the mortgage bubble, which I'm not going to today, what you discover is the suppression of the gold price and the manipulation and the blowing up of the mortgage bubble are really two parts of the same coin called the so-called strong dollar policy. A series of things we've done to load the globe up with debt to keep the dollar up in a variety of ways that have nothing to do with fundamental productivity. And so I'd go into these meetings with 20 or 30 lawyers, half of them from the Department of Justice, and they'd all basically try and persuade you that you were crazy. But I knew I wasn't. I'd go back to the hotel, and Bill can remember some of these calls, and so I'd say, this is so Orwellian, I need to talk to somebody sane. And I'd call Bill, and he'd pick up the phone, and I'd say, Bill, this is Catherine, and he'd say, did you see what those bastards did today? and that's when I knew that this was a man who knew that there's a line between civilization and a nut house. And Bill, I've never met anybody who understands that line. And if we are going to have a fundamental restructuring of our institution and our financial system, that's the kind of line we need. We need a network of people. And through Bill, I got to know a lot of the group at GATA. Bill always wants me to tell the story. At one point, I had the foolishness or temerity to turn down an offer to serve as a governor of the Federal Reserve. But it was about this period that when Bill told me that he had a board opening, he needed another board member. I said, Bill, I have never lobbied to be on a board in my life, but you know something? I'm begging you now, I want to be your board member. So this is a network and a group of people who are starting to fashion the new alignments between local leadership, global investors, and technology to start to build real alternatives. Because if the Titanic's not working, and it doesn't matter whether it crashes or not, it's not working, we have to get back to Main Street and get into the business of creating fundamental economic opportunity. So what's it going to take to win Main Street? I want to tell another story that some of you have heard me tell, the red button story. How many people here have heard me tell the red button story? Doug Bowie, Bill Murphy, okay. Summer of 2000 is a momentous summer. I was speaking to a group of people called the Spiritual Frontier Foundation International. They're a group of highly educated, mostly Americans, mostly North American. They go to a conference once a year to talk about how they can help our society evolve spiritually. Very spiritually committed people. And a friend of mine had asked me to give a speech which has now become an article called Narco Dollars for Dummies. It was so successful, Wiley Publishing made us change the name, so now it's Narco Dollars for Beginners. But it's basically a light, entertaining story of how the economics of organized crime work for people who don't want to know anything about organized crime. And I was in the middle of this speech in front of this 100 people, and I was discussing the fact that the Department of Justice at the time says that the U.S. financial system launders $500 billion to $1 trillion a year of all illicit cash flow. So that's narcotics trafficking, that's tax evasion, that's financial fraud. It's all sort of illegal stuff. And I said to this audience of very spiritually committed people, what would happen if we stopped being the worldwide leader in global money laundering? And we had a little discussion, and they said, well, our mutual funds would go down because the stock market, the money would leave the U.S. stock market. And we'd have trouble financing the government deficit because now we're completely dependent on borrowing more money to keep regular operations going. So our taxes would go up and our government checks might stop. And I said, okay, well, let's pretend there's a big red button up here on the lectern. If you push that button, you can stop all illicit flows tomorrow, but in particular, you can stop all narcotics trafficking in your neighborhood, your county, your state, and your country tomorrow. Who here will push that button? And out of 100 people dedicated to evolving our society spiritually, guess how many would push the button? Bill and Doug, you can't answer. Guess how many would push the button? Well, let me ask a question here. How many people here would push the button? I know Murphy would. He's been pushing the red button for years. Only one would push the button. So I said to the other 99, why would you not push the button? And they said, we don't want our mutual funds to go down, and we don't want our taxes to go up, and we don't want our government checks to stop. And so that's why the topic of my talk is winning support on Main Street, because the critical issue is not how do we push the red button, the critical issue is how do we make money pushing the red button, because if we can figure out how to make money pushing the red button, then we can push the red button, because you and I both know that non-sustainable economics are non-sustainable. And precious metals has an incredibly important role to play in an integral approach to pushing that red button and moving to a sustainable economy where we globalize, but not in a way that drains communities, in a way that creates fundamental productivity on the ground. So let me quickly talk about where the opportunity is. Look at any community, look at your neighborhood, because one of your best investment opportunities is going to be your neighborhood. Look at the export and import of capital in your neighborhood. If you take any neighborhood in America, and I've spent about 5 years driving about 250,000 miles around America. So come with me, if you will, to the Hickory Valley Women's Club. At an average meeting of the Hickory Valley Women's Club, we have about 12 women, of which I'm a member. We have one woman who's making 3% on a local bank CD and can afford to take no financial risk. We have another woman who's getting 5% in her 401k or IRA and who's scared to death because she thinks she's financing Yaya. You know, she's got her money in Citibank. She thinks she's financing Yaya, but she doesn't think she's getting a reasonable yield for the risk and discomfort that she feels. And then we have another woman paying 26% on her credit card debt. Now, I'm from Wall Street. That's a 2,000 basis point spread. That's the first time. I never saw a 2,000 basis point spread on Wall Street. That's an incredible arbitrage if we can disintermediate the intermediation that has occurred. Okay? That's opportunity number one in local investment. The second, let's go down to the Hickory Valley meat market or the local dry cleaners. Across America, there's billions of dollars of local revenues and local profits, which is trading, its equity is trading at a multiple of 1 to 5 times, and these days more than 1 times. Right, so you'll have a McDonald's franchise, which is, I don't know what McDonald's is trading at, but anybody know? Shouldn't have used McDonald's. But it's trading at, say, 15 to 20, and then you've got the small business that's trading at a multiple of 1. So the cost of capital, and any of the folks in the mining industry will know this, the cost of capital spread between the little guys and the big guys does not reflect fundamental productivity. It reflects the intervention of the federal credit and the manipulation of the markets. But that's an opportunity, because if you can finance places with equity, then you can create a financial model. I mean, imagine that, because I've always wanted to trade places. I've always wanted to go long London and short Hong Kong. But you can create a financial model where if you have a venture fund that's invested in a place, you can reduce consumption in a way that creates financial capital gains. You know, there's this myth that we can't make money by reducing consumption. We can. You can create, global investors can create capital gains by healing the environment in a place. Okay? So there's an opportunity to reverse. The biggest one in America, and this changes country to country, governmental investment in the United States has a significant negative return on investment by place. Okay? So, for example, I used to run programs where we would spend $250,000 to do something that we could do for $50,000. Now, in one administration, the Clinton administration, when I tried to persuade the head of that program to re-engineer by place, she looked at me, turned bright red in her face, and God bless her, she's an honest woman, she said, "But how could we generate fees for our friends?" Okay, because there's a lot of corporate stocks that are being held up by those cash flows. So if we can re-engineer by place in an equity opportunity and re-engineer government, there's tremendous new wealth that can be created. The message, in summary, the message I'm going to leave you with today, before I go on, I just tell you this. Does everybody know who the Beardsville ladies are? I'm from a part of the country where everybody does these investment clubs. You know, 12 people get together, do a little investment club. And the Beardsville ladies in the last, 5 to 10 years became the most famous example. It's a group of older women in Ohio who were very, made a couple books anyway. But my message today is the Beardsville ladies are one of our most powerful political allies in what we're all trying to do. And the beauty of trying to win them as a market is they'll pay us. My company, Solari, is working on 2 products, the first of which is Solari Investor Circles, which are investment clubs that help people focus on local investment. And the goal, it's really a publishing business. The goal is to create about 20 recipes, whether it's to grab that 2,000 basis point spread that I just described, that will help people start to take their money out of traditional corporate investments and take advantage of liquefying that which is liquid locally. If that product is successful, our next one will be Solari Venture Funds, but I'm not going to talk about that today. We're starting to build those 20 recipes using something called audio seminars. You call into a bridge line, 200 people get on the bridge line, you record it, you put it out later as an MP3 or CD file. And so one of the first ones we decided to do, because 2 of the recipes we want to be the savings plans, one of them by Gold Money. I'm looking at James Turk. Gold Money has a wonderful savings plan. I think it's the lowest, it's $50. Every month they'll deduct $50 from your checking account, and you buy $50 of gold. You know, it's kind of a steady thing. It's the kind of thing I could give to my niece for Christmas. The other is the savings plan for silver and gold coins by the Money Changer. Franklin Sanders is a dealer about 2 hours down the road from me in Tennessee, who's very, very good at sort of dealing on Main Street. And so we wanted these savings plan to be 2 of our 20 recipes. So we decided to do 3 audio seminars and see what the result would be. And I just want to sort of share what we discovered. We simply put out a notice on our email list and the email list of a couple friends, ended up selling about 300 to 400 of either the MP3 file or the CD, called into the bridge lines, and most of the audience, an incredibly diverse group of people who ended up listening from what we can tell, most of them are not financially literate, and most of them, if you asked them a year or 2 ago if they would ever invest in silver and gold, they would have said, it's impossible. And if you said why, they would say, I don't know, I never thought of it. I mean, it's just not me. I don't know anything about it, whatever. As it turns out, to our complete astonishment, out of about 400 people, from what we can tell, because some of them have reported directly to us, I've had reports of that group buying about $750,000 of coins, digital gold, or precious metals or mining stocks related securities. And the dealers who have reported back to me sort of their experience from those, you know, from somebody calling up and saying, I'm a member of the Solari Action Network, my guess is there's probably about another $750,000 sales. Okay? So we're taking people who have almost no connection or knowledge of precious metals, and within a relatively short time in which they're paying us to teach them, they're making sizable investments for them. And remember, some of the people in this network are very modest, of very modest means. Now, what does that tell me? What that tells me is there is a real hunger and a real market for precious metals on Main Street, where the marketing is put into a context of both creating an investment for them which is sound, but also making a case that precious metals and sound money is part of solving all the things in the world that they don't like. So what I'm saying is there's a real opportunity on Wall Street. I mean, you can tell where I'm from. There's a real opportunity on Main Street. Now, there are 2 $64 questions in here. We've watched a process of globalization which is centralizing wealth, but it's not creating wealth. It's destroying wealth. So we are centralizing control of economic and political resources, but it is that we're creating wealth. And so that has been possible, or been made possible by 2 things. One is very cheap fossil fuel. The other is a federal credit that has allowed this explosion of debt. And the question is, what do we do now? I know many of you have heard about peak oil, and I'm not going to talk about peak oil, but if peak oil is true, or any part of it is true, it's going to change the fundamental relationship between what we do locally and what we do globally. And so we have, and the second thing is the federal credit absolutely is, as an economic matter, is bankrupt, and the dollar is being supported by increasing amounts of coercion and force. I always, those of you who know me know that I call the Patriot Act the Control and Concentration of Cash Flow Act of 2001. But it's going to take increasing force to keep the system liquefied. And so the fundamental economics are pushing us in one of two directions. We can go to a permanent war economy, or we can get back to creating fundamental productivity on Wall Street. And that gets back to the role of precious metals, because what are we going to do if we start to re-optimize how things work locally? We're going to need to create liquidity between places, and that's going to take sound money. It's the only thing that can do it. This week, the Money Changer, Franklin Sanders Dealership, and Solari are putting a tool up on the web, and when it goes up, I would really suggest you go take a look at it. The URL is going to be www.silverandgoldourmoney.com. Let me say it again, silverandmoneyourgold.com. Now, when you go to this website, silverandgoldourmoney.com, when you go to this website, you're going to look at it and you're going to think this is the stupidest thing you've ever seen in your life. It is a calculator, and you go to Kitco. It'll tell you to go to Kitco. You get the spot price for gold. You put it in, and then you put in how much money you want to spend in dollars, and it will spit out what combinations of coin you can use to pay that thing. Believe it or not, what I've found on Main Street is the biggest obstacle between people using precious metals as a currency is the absence of this calculator. Okay? So, because where we're going with the Solari investor circles is if we can start to get enough people in a place comfortable with understanding precious metals, in buying silver and gold coins, in investing in digital gold, if we can get them comfortable enough, then we can get them to start thinking in measuring their wealth in terms of ounces and not in dollars. But the reality is, all across America, there's significant interest and hunger about community currencies. There are groups all over the country that are talking about all these incredibly complex systems to start community currencies. But we don't need a complex system to start community currencies if we can just start to, it's called the just do it method. And I think from the initial responses we've gotten, which are very modest, and I don't want to over-exaggerate them, but what we see is that there's initial interest and hunger to do this. Main Street knows that the dollar isn't working, and if and when the dollar starts to fall again, they need an alternative. And that's our opportunity if we can be there to do the retail opportunity. In closing, I wanted to just quote, this is one of my favorite quotes from Franklin Sanders. He said, "What I want to remind those who contemplate economic crash for way too long," I mean, I don't know, have you guys known all the Armageddon thinkers for the last 20 years? What I want to remind those who contemplate economic crash for way too long is that the morning after the crash, someone's going to wake up wanting breakfast. And someone's going to cook that breakfast for them. Our opportunity is not after the crash. Our opportunity is now. Our opportunity is getting the cooker and the cookee to understand that they can make that transaction today with precious metals. They don't need fiat paper. And what I'm trying to tell you is I think that market's there, but it's going to take us networking and gathering our power to build on our initial successes to understand how to reach Main Street, because there's an educational job to be done. So with that, I want to thank you, because I think there is no one I know in the financial world that has done more to bring these different and highly diverse networks together than Bill Murphy and Chris Powell and the people at GATA. Because when trouble comes, the question is not what do we do, the question is who. If the Titanic is not working, or if the Titanic is going to sink, the question we have to ask is, who are we going to get in the boat with? And I don't know of any better group of people to get in the boat with these guys. So, Bill, Chris, thank you. More applause. We have a little bit of time for questions, so I can take questions if there are any.